Hi everyone, I'm Blair Eiseman, Supervisor of Professional Development, and I'm here to welcome you to Let's Just Hit Record, our PD podcast here in South Brunswick. Episode 3 is Bibliotherapy Part 2. I'm joined once again by Lisa Maganello and Kate Hanasowski, both library media specialists from the high school, Kyle Nemes, science teacher from Crossroads North, as well as other colleagues from across the district. We're back with some more book recommendations for you for your summer reading book list, and we're going to start with some nonfiction titles that encourage reflection, understanding ourselves and understanding others, and we'll end with some fiction books that mirror some of the everyday issues our students and maybe even you as an adult have faced. Glenn Ferraris, 6th grade math teacher from Crossroads North, is going to start us off with his nonfiction book pick.
The book that I'm going to talk to you about is Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain. And I really look at this book for two audiences. One, for fellow introverts. It talks a little bit about how and why your heart might be beating and that you're exhausted after a social event. It might explain why you're deemed quiet, but when you're in a small group with your friends or colleagues and you're the loud one. It definitely helps understand and explain a little bit of your thinking, right? So it's for fellow self-proclaimed introverts. The other side of it is for extroverts out there, to help you get a better understanding of why a friend or a student have the traits of being an introvert. Right. So many of you might be extroverted, might be the one to participate and volunteer for dances and assemblies, while introverts like myself are just praying not to be called on stage. So it gives a little bit of understanding of the people in front of you, both students and colleagues. We also have that student that is just praying that you don't call on them, even though they know the answer. And if you went over and chatted with them one-on-one, they'd be more than happy to talk to you about it. So I would recommend Quiet for basically anyone, if you have an interest as yourself being an introvert or to better understand introverts. This is definitely good for everybody. So Quiet by Susan Cain.
This next book recommendation comes from Kim Zito, North Librarian, and she is recommending one of my favorite authors, podcasters, speakers out there, Brené Brown. So if you know Brené Brown, you're probably just like Kim and I, and you probably love her messages and what she has to offer. And if you don't know Brené Brown, I'm going to agree with Kim that she is absolutely worth checking out. And Kim does a phenomenal job of kind of explaining why and what she brings to the table. So without further ado, Kim Zito.
We have had such a rough year. Everyone is exhausted, and we are trying to do the best, most perfect job that we can, and under less than ideal circumstances. And everyone, I think, is frustrated and exhausted and somehow feeling like it hasn't been enough. And that reminded me of one of my favorite books and favorite authors. And so I've returned to this book for myself, and I'm suggesting it for others. It's The Gifts of Imperfection, Let Go of Who You Think You're Supposed to Be and Embrace Who You Are by Brené Brown. Brené Brown is a researcher in Texas, and I always try to listen to her books because she has this fantastic Texas accent. It reminds me of the 12 years that I spent with my family back in Houston and Dallas. So I would suggest listening to her or maybe her podcast, because she has some great messages about accepting yourself as imperfect and just being happy that you've made a contribution. So some of the chapters in this book are cultivating a resilient spirit, letting go of perfectionism and cultivating self-compassion, letting go of comparison, and getting rid of self-doubt and supposed to. We have all just done what we can this year, we've done what we could in this year. And so I think we all need a reminder to be easier on ourselves and to take some time to acknowledge that we're all not perfect. And nothing is going to be perfect when you're working with students, right? We just can't possibly manage that. So at this time of reflection, as we finish up the year and we spend the summer thinking about how this year has gone, and we get ready for next school year, I would suggest taking a few minutes to pick up this book or listen to Brené Brown and go through some of the strategies that she uses to let yourself be who you are and understand that you're not perfect. So the book again is The Gifts of Imperfection, and it's by Brené Brown.
I too love Brené Brown. I was actually introduced to her a few years ago by Bonnie Capes. She shared with me the title Rising Strong. And that title was all about getting up from the fall, resetting your life when you're experiencing adversity. Brené Brown is big on vulnerability. She's super relatable and real and inspiring. And I know she also had a Netflix special out a couple years ago called The Call to Courage. So check that out if you're interested.
Relationships can be complicated. If you're looking for a way to reflect on or to improve the relationships in your life, Kyle has a great book for you.
Before I say the book, I have to give the background. So I really like books that make me think and try to be a better person. You can call them self-help books, whatever you want to call them. And so I feel like each of them always has something that I can learn from. But this is the only book I would say that has truly transformed my relationships with a lot of people in my life. And the book is called Anatomy of Peace. And so it's really, really good. And so here's what I would say. It's not a heavy book, but it has a lot of really helpful things in it. So by that, I mean, it's written like a fiction book. So it's really easy to read, really easy to breeze through. But the whole reason for even reading it is I would say if there's any relationships at all you have in your life, whether it be with a parent, with a sibling, with your kids, with your students, with your boss, with whoever, if you have any relationship that you is not as good maybe as you wish it was, and you're pretty sure it's their fault, right? If you are saying, well, if only they did this, if only they did this, there's a much better chance it would be a better relationship. So I know I had a couple of those, and this book is really good at breaking down, we'll say, conflicts in a really easy way. And you can see kind of what's happening and ultimately how to help make them go better and what you can do. It's just really, really good. And it has really actionable small things that have just honestly transformed my life in a very positive way. And I've read it 3 times. And every time I read it, sometimes I think about relationships with family. One time I read it, I thought all about my relationships with my students and stuff like that. So it is very good. And if you're going to read it, and I hope that you do, I have 2 bits of advice for any reader who ever reads this book. And they are, 1, once you read it, you're going to really start to see conflicts a lot more clearly. So it's going to be really easy to almost help your other people in your life by telling them what they're doing wrong in their conflicts. Don't do that. I did, and it didn't work out well. So as much as you have the knowledge now to potentially help other people's conflicts, it's really important that you just do your part in your own self-improvement and not tell other people. So I made that mistake. And the second piece of advice, it's such an easy read that it's a fiction book. It's so darn easy to read that it's really easy to kind of breeze through. And I very much always recommend that you read part of it, basically question it, kind of call it out for things that you think aren't true, and then live your life for a couple weeks and live that part of it and then come back to the book. So I very much recommend that you read it, stop, live your life, and then go back to the book as opposed to breeze through it. So I hope that you read it. And if you do, please hit me up and talk to me, because I can talk about this book all day long. And I can tell you Jen Fava's read it, Bonnie Capes has read it. And I'm sure some other people I've given the book to as well.
Indian Fields librarian Susan Delina shares 2 great middle grade summer reading choices from 2 fantastic authors.
As a children's librarian, I mostly read picture books and middle grade fiction. So today I'd like to share two new-ish middle grade titles for your summer reading. The first is Blended by the amazing Sharon Draper. It's the story of Isabella, and she feels like there are two disparate versions of herself as a result of her parents' very uncomfortable divorce. When she's with her father, who's a corporate attorney, she is Isabella, driven around in a Mercedes around a fancy neighborhood where they are the only Black family. And on weeks when she's with her mother in a small, not so fancy house, she's just plain Izzy, driven around in an old pickup truck. Although there are realistic issues of racism and gun violence, which I promise you is appropriate for middle grade readers, but I think you'll get it too, the story truly centers on Izzy's struggle to find her own identity in her blended family. This one is a gem. The other story I want to recommend is a story I read to my fifth graders last year when we first went remote. They were so engaged with this story that they stayed with me for an hour at a clip, whining when it was time to stop for the day. From the Desk of Zoe Washington centers on a girl addressing social justice and navigating her own dreams after she receives a letter from her incarcerated father. She begins to secretly exchange letters with her father, and she comes to believe in his innocence. She has to hide her communication and her investigation into the crime from her mother. And of course, this not only impacts her relationship with her mother, but also everyone else around her, her stepfather, her grandmother, and her best friend. And that's the strength of this story. Zoe thoughtfully considering her choices as she pursues everything in her life, a reality cooking show, researching her father's alleged crime, and disobeying her mother because she believes it's the right thing to do. I hope you enjoyed these two titles for your summer reading.
Thank you for two great recommendations, Susan. I, for one, love to have a book in my back pocket for when I'm on a car trip with my kids. So if one of those is available as an audiobook, they may be great choices for our next car trip. We're going to end with a great conversation with a woman who inspires, and it's called Becoming by Michelle Obama. I actually listened to it as an audiobook on Hoopla, so you can get it from the public library if you choose to. I listened to half and read half, so I can tell you that the audiobook makes for a great conversation. It feels like Michelle Obama is actually talking to you in your car or in your kitchen as she kind of shares her life from the time she's growing up in Chicago all the way up through her time in the White House. And she really gives you a perspective of how her world looks. Being one of the most famous women in the world, you would think that there wouldn't be a lot of common ground for those of us that live normal, average lives. But I found that I kept thinking to myself, Michelle Obama, if I met you, I think we would be friends. So if you think you might like to learn more about her and her life, I think Becoming, I can't recommend it highly enough.
Thank you, Lisa, for that recommendation. I also loved Michelle Obama's book, but I do have serious regret that I didn't listen to the audio. I've heard from many people that that's the way to go. Thank you to not only Lisa, but Kate, Kyle, Glenn, Kim, and Susan for their recommendations. And thank you for tuning in to Let's Just Hit Record. Stay tuned for episode 4 and take care.